Welcome to the NYC Workforce Drop. I'm Greg Morris, CEO of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. You know, we dropped a podcast a little while back, and I opened it up, and it was a fantastic podcast with Aisha George, who leads Strive NYC, but I had to open it up by saying I don't want to jinx it, but you know the Knicks are going to be playing, and when this pod drops, I'm expecting a win or two. And now when this pod drops, I don't want to jinx it, but could we be on the precipice of a title? Listen, I just want you to be aware wherever you're listening, however you're listening, whether you are doing your laundry, walking your dog, you're on your city bike, wherever it is and what's up. Listen, this city has got a bit of Knicks fever going on right now, and it's hard not to just love this team. So first and foremost, let me just say, if you're a fan, I'm with you. If you're not a fan, get on the bandwagon, would you please? Because I think it's time for the city to feel good. So I'm hoping that a title is in our future. But anyway, listen, this is a workforce development podcast. What am I doing getting distracted by talking about the Knicks? How dare I? Because the truth of the matter is, in the world of economic development, workforce development in New York City, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to react to. And if you didn't catch it, there's been some traction here. I've been quoted in the Times, talking about what's going on with EDC. Do we have a new EDC head right now? I don't know. Should I not jinx that? I don't know. But the reality is this is a particular moment in time where finding a first job in the city has become complicated. And at exactly the same time, more and more data is coming out about what it means to be a mid-career professional and how it is that in some cases that mid-career professional is getting stalled, and that's not an individual problem, it's a structural problem. And this fantastic report that has just come out called Sidetracked, The Hidden Crisis in Mid-Career Professional Economic Mobility, is going to be the centerpiece of today's conversation, with the phenomenal, with the remarkable, with the extraordinary, with the highly connected and absolutely delightful Angie Kamath, the dean of NYU School of Professional Studies. I get the luxury, to be honest, of being in a number of rooms with Angie and in thinking about how our city is positioning itself and the paths that it's creating in different occupations, different spaces. Her career trajectory, which includes the private sector, the not-for-profit sector, city government, and higher education, is unlike anything. And her particular analysis of how our city is working and what it needs to improve is something I absolutely positively treasure. And not for nothing. Her investment and her focus with NYU School of Professional Studies and the Burning Glass Institute on mid-career professionals, I think is absolutely critical. Those of you listening right now, if you're in a particular moment in time where you're wondering how it is and why it is that you might be struggling, I'm guessing this pod may give you a little bit of insight. But maybe more important than anything else, if you're part of this network, know that we stand together and you are not alone. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Manhattan Neighborhood Network studio, the NYC Workforce Drop, Angie Kamath. Angie, thanks for joining us. It's great to see you here. Welcome to Manhattan Neighborhood Network.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Do you know this neighborhood at all? Are you familiar with this West 38th?
I am not.
Right?
I am not.
Right? And here's why I mention this, because when we walked into the studio, were you there? You were already here. You were hanging out. You were on the corner. you were just vibing out here in the corner?
Yes, well, I'm a city biker. I'm an avid city
There it
biker.
is.
And
There
there
it
you
is.
go. On 37th and 10th Avenue is a open city bike
Look
dock.
at you.
So, yeah.
I've seen you before with your helmet, and you got your whole thing. I know how you do.
My favorite story about City Bike, really quick, is our Chief Sustainability Officer, Cecil Scheib. He and I did like a full meeting from Midtown down to NYU, from like 50th Street all the way down to Washington Square on city bikes parallel, and we came up with all of these great ideas, including expanding funding for a sustainability internship program. So maybe it's the next new trend to do work meetings on city bikes.
Do your work meetings on City Bikes. Shout out to City Bike
Yeah.
in all of its forms. You're also a marathoner.
I am. I'm a slogger, a slow jogger, but I get through it. And if you finish it, and you get the medal.
You get
what
it done.
counts.
That's right. I heard, what's the story? 4 New York cities?
4 New York cities. I think maybe I'm on to my 12th. I'm gonna wrap it up this November. I'm gonna do my 13th and be done with it.
Wrap it up.
Yep,
I'm gonna wrap
yep.
it
I'm gonna
up.
move on to a new hobby, I think.
How do you find the time to do that? Before we get into any of this, I just want to know how you make the time, because you're a powerhouse in this work. You're a workforce force, a self-described workforce nerd, by the way.
It's true. Proud member.
That's your words, not mine. And I think you said nerd and obsessive, I think is the
Yes.
word. But how does the workforce nerd and obsessive find time to do your marathon training?
So it might feel like jargony terms, but like the whole notion of self-care and take care of yourself and kind of clear your head on a daily basis is super important. So yeah, you kind of have to, I have to do yoga or bike ride or run or jog or walk every day to clear my head. Otherwise it swirls and it's noisy in there and it's not as productive or creative. And I have learned that.
Yeah, how long did it take to learn that in your
About,
career? Just out of curiosity.
I would probably say about 20 years. I'm about two
Give
or
or
three
take.
years into this, where I just have been really intense. Ideas generating a minute, not sleeping very well, and then like kind of change that.
I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm prompting it obviously as well too, because you have a very full and extraordinary sort of career journey, I think. So whether we pick on the workforce
Or I
development
can't
space,
keep a job because
No,
I keep
don't-
switching.
well,
but yes,
I think it's a matter of leaving your
expansive.
mark, and then finding the next mark to make from the nonprofit space. Streetwise Partners,
my first job in the workforce space. Yes.
right? That had to be amazing. I'm guessing that was also a handful.
It was really fun and the most entrepreneurial job I have ever had. And I studied entrepreneurship in undergrad, so it was really a fulfilling job, and like it warms my heart to think about that period of time. And the organization is in such great hands for so many years, has done amazing things. So it's also fun to be able to watch from the sidelines how organizations grow and thrive under different leadership.
And then you've got Per Scholas as well under your belt. You had led Per Scholas.
Only one office. Executive director of the New York office. It's now just this national powerhouse. But yes, very fond memories of Per Scholas. It still comes up often in terms of what I learned there and what is really transferable about those skills and that model to, big, huge, higher ed.
So you got this tremendous sort of space in the nonprofit sector, and also you had your space and time as well in City Gov.
It's true.
Small Business Services. What were the titles that you had in that space?
I think assistant commissioner and deputy commissioner. I was there for 7 years, and it was really a really terrific run, a really important time for New Yorkers and jobs. And I was there from 2006 to 2014. We had the financial crisis, we had Hurricane Superstorm Sandy, just a lot of the whole middle skills kind of job. Not revolution, but kind of the awareness around middle skills jobs, and that people with white collar backgrounds could really have trouble and have structural problems in employment, which is, I think, a really interesting connection to this Burning Glass report that we did.
Yeah.
But I remember it was this moment of kind of clutching pearls of, oh my gosh, people in finance can lose their jobs and be on the unemployment line. And it's like, it can happen to anyone. It's not really anyone's fault. It's, part of the economy. and what we can do to inoculate ourselves against it is really important to think about and to design systems for.
I watched an old YouTube clip of you with Randy Pierce, Brick
Awesome.
TV,
Oh
the
my
awesome
gosh.
Randy Pierce, who's been on the podcast. And
A good man, very
I
good
think
man.
it was something like 14, 15 years, something like that. And and here's what he was asking you, because he was talking about, now we're in recession mode, we're in a crisis mode, employment opportunities. And you said the greatest thing to start, he said, what do you, he asked you, what should people know? Because this is when you're at SPS. What should people know about jobs and job opportunities? And the first thing you said was, you are not alone. And
I
was
would
like,
still say that today.
right?
Yeah.
That you carry that with you now. Now we're pivoting to, now you're in the higher ed space. And you have been. You've had this trajectory. And I'm
Yeah,
guessing
it's
that's
been 10
something.
years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Talk about the different higher ed, because you're at NYU, but you have a history before NYU in the higher ed space. Talk a little bit about that. And I want to weave in this notion of you are not alone, because I suspect this has been something that's found its way across your career and how you think about workforce development.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that I said that. I don't actually remember saying that.
It's true.
That
It's on
so
vid.
me, and it's how I would
Yes.
respond to that.
Absolutely.
That question today. So, how did I get to higher ed? I have to thank my friends and colleagues at Per Scholas for that. So, Per Scholas is an incredible place, and even the most evidence-based models and kind of really strong programs often can have trouble recruiting people, right? Because I think the opportunity cost of being in education is, well, I'm not out there making money. I'm full-time investing in myself, and so that's hard. And so I say that because at the time, and I think it's probably increased, but at the time, something like 70% of recruits who came to interview at Per Scholas had some college and no degree. And when asked why they came, why they were interested, they basically said, I've left college because I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't feel relevant. It's not exciting me. And I don't see this ROI working out for me. And for a while there, I sort of said, great, like their problem is our fortune, is our abundance. And at a certain point, I come from... I love education. I come from a really educated family. I'm super proud that my grandfather went to Cambridge University and my dad was a Rhodes Scholar in India when the entire country produced one Rhodes Scholar in the 1960s. So I love nothing more than education and learning. And at some certain point, I realized I was being pretty inauthentic to myself to be in a program that focused on being an alternative to higher ed, because my family, myself, we have all benefited from it, and I love institutions of higher learning and just the idea of ideas. And we were talking before the podcast happened, and the reason why I love university and academia is ideas are our currency, right? It's a place where you're expected to think a lot, to put ideas out there, good, bad, ugly, where you get to be challenged, where you get to be questioned, where you get to defend yourself, and that's really important. And so after shaking my fist at higher ed for a long time for being not as relevant or compelling or focused on value, I sort of said, let me go in there and see what I can do to try to change it. And so that led me to the City University of New York, where I was for 4 great years, including the COVID years, which kind of has like
COVID
some
time.
calculation of like dog year equivalents in there.
Yep.
And then into 2021, I transitioned over to NYU.
And but let me just ask, the expectation from your family, I'm guessing, is that you would be someone who had multiple degrees.
Correct.
That was the expectation from jump. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and that was
Embedded within you.
thrilling idea for myself and my brother. That was thrilling. Yes.
I'm sure you loved that. That was like, yes, let's add a lot of different pressure and enthusiasm, but also the angst of trying to be able to succeed. That's got to be hanging over you as you grow up, as you're thinking. But you're also someone, I'm guessing, who thrives in that, right?
Yeah, as a first generation American daughter of immigrants, the idea of pressure and expectation is always there. I was at our graduation recently, and I was talking to students. It was an award ceremony, and I talked to all the parents and basically said, I grew up feeling like all that hard work was me. And when I went to events, award ceremonies with my parents, and my teachers would sort of go up to my mom and dad and say, "Congratulations! How did you do such a good job?" or whatever. And I always remember thinking, "What did they do? It's all me." And so snotty teenager thought, right? But what I said recently to our faculty was, what I thought to my parents was like, I had no rules, and I just thought that like they didn't know better because they were immigrants. That's actually called trust. When my parents let me wander around and do whatever, that wasn't their ignoring me. That was giving me time and space to explore. When they didn't kind of herald me with gifts or lots of congratulations when I got good grades, that's actually high expectations. And so I never viewed the notion of more and more education or pressure to have a choice-filled life or pressure to do better than my parents as anything other than like trust, love of exploring, and high expectations. And so I talk about that a lot with our students, and I think that's at least the positive frame, and I totally acknowledge that for some that can be pressure, that can be an albatross, that can be trying to be someone who you're not or trying to appease family ideas. But hopefully, with enough exploration, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today, that nonlinear careers and pivoting are just what you do. It's normal, it's expected. And to be fair, I did start out with a career in banking because I thought that would make my parents happy.
There's your private sector work, right?
And I kind of knew it wasn't going to, but no harm, no foul. What's wrong with a banking job? But pretty quickly pivoted after a few years and got back on track.
Before we dig into the report, I want to dig into the report, and I want to get into what it is that you see us as a city seeking to do and accomplish, and the way we should be thinking about what's ahead in terms of our economic growth and development and the future of jobs in the city, and based on all your history and awareness. I do want to pause and wonder and ask, really, specific to higher education. I mean, we're in a moment where I think the questions about higher ed and the value of a degree have become something that I think our higher education institutions are reflecting on. And I think individuals who are pursuing that path are thinking about because of the costs associated with it. And I just want to start this by saying I was so grateful to you for opening up our conference, our first 2025. We called it the new compact. You were kind of kicking it off. And it was about this idea of how do we talk about value.
Right.
And I also want to say I'm also very aware that you are someone who has been championing education throughout the course of your career and throughout the course of your work. And I'm just wondering, how do you think about that now from the seat that you have at NYU? Because you're talking to students, you're talking to their parents. They have to be thinking about the cost and value in this moment as well.
So I loved at that conference, and again, kudos to the coalition for having really important conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable for your members and uncomfortable for all of us in this space, but they're the conversations that need to happen. And when I think about that moment, as you just reminded me, I think about the bracelet that John King had on his wrist that said, affordability is economic development. And so that will be, that's the thing that I carry in my pocket from that event. And I hope a lot of people carry it in their pocket or wear it around their wrist because you and I remember the day when it felt new and bold to say workforce development is economic development.
Yes.
So I'll start off by saying affordability is economic development. If we can train, educate, and keep people and families and communities kind of intact and thriving, nothing better, right? And so getting to your question, as I think about higher ed, I mean, there's a couple of pieces that I think are important. EDC, New York City EDC last year, might have been late 2024, but I think it was 2025, put out a great report on the economic impact of higher ed in New York City. And just to say, New York City is home to 150 colleges and universities. 150. No one thinks about that. It was a shock to me when I saw that. Again, no one's cheating, but CUNY makes up 26 of the 150. 150, but that still leaves, 124
That's right.
other places. And again, you knock off the big names like Columbia or NYU, you still have 122 other organizations. And so that is really important. And I'd say the vast majority of colleges, in the country, the 4,000 institutions that are here, substantial number of them are public and therefore, by definition, affordable. So, when I hear folks like Ted Mitchell from the American Council on Education, he rightfully gets a little bit frustrated with the media that sort of says and equates the elite top 50 schools with all of higher ed. Again, it's the same thing to kind of only think of one system in New York City. It's the same thing that Ted Mitchell thinks about nationally, which is, and what about the other 3,950 schools that are actually anchors in their community, usually public, that are the places that people go, that are very responsive, that are doing the, technical, vocational, professional education for themselves. So I say that to say, I get pretty annoyed when, that'll be the polite term because we're on a podcast.
So polite.
I get pretty annoyed when everyone throws kind of the baby out with the bathwater and equates the kind of top 50 or whatever your kind of Ivy Plus grouping at the very top that tends to be private and tends to be expensive, and sort of said that's higher ed, because that's incredibly disrespectful to the vast majority of educational institutions and educators in this country. When I think about affordability, again, every institution is not made the same. I think that Promise programs that have been happening across the country are great. They are contagious. They are very politically savvy, and they're just great. And that's been kind of a movement, I'd say, in the past 10 years. That's fantastic. I mean, I haven't counted how many places have Promise programs, but many, many do, and we have an NYU Promise program. And the expectation is we have to do that. And again, whatever the marker is, whether it's for families under $125,000 dollars in annual income or under $100,000, that's a good first step. Last thing I would say is a place like NYU, we are the nation's largest private research university. I didn't know that till I started working here. CUNY is the largest urban public. NYU is the largest private research. We put and have more undergraduate students who are Pell eligible than all of the Ivies combined. So again, that's behind my don't paint us with one brush stroke, because as a large institution, where nearly a quarter of our students are first-generation learners and Pell are receiving Pell and TAP aid, that's really significant. We're doing our part. Do we want to do more? Of course. But I think that's important just to know the data and the facts.
You talk a little bit, and I'm an NYU grad, by the way.
I know that. Go Violets!
Go Violets! The violet. I mean, let's be honest. It's a beautiful flower.
That's not what I thought you were going to say.
I don't know what
It's a beautiful flower.
It's a beautiful flower. Is it a strange sort of mascot? Yeah. The mascot.
Bobcat.
The bobcat, which comes, if I understand correctly, from the Bobst Library. It was where the bobcat was from, because the catalog system was
Correct.
the bobcat.
How nerdy and cool is that?
I'm going to emphasize the nerdy part of that.
That's true.
The NYU space. I'm an NYU graduate class of what was it? I don't even remember now. It goes so far back. 96,
Double Violet.
Double. Look at that.
That's what we call you.
Oh man, that was such. Those were amazing times. I am curious with you. In your role right now, and by the way, I love when you do your video. You've been made. I don't know if people have seen this. The Instagram videos, the little short videos. I feel like you've been trying to do something to open up the doorway to what it means to have your role, as you not just welcome students, but also talk about like your day to day.
It is really important, and again, it's my Gen Z counterparts, and again, I think there's a lot of points to be made, but it is so thrilling to learn and to kind of see that generational shift of there are things that I know and there's so many other things that millennials and Gen Z know better. And so, you asked me what my comfort zone is, and it would not be doing kind of 30 to 45-second videos in my office, vids.
Right.
But what's been really important, what they've taught me is just being not perfect, but real and authentic, helping folks understand that I'm not like the principal that folks are, used to, that you don't want to interact with your dean. I'm the leader of a school. People trust me. I only have a job because people are making huge investments in their future.
That's right.
By paying tuition, and I have to answer to students. And so wouldn't it make sense that if I really work for students, that students ought to know me, and ought to know me because, again, every leader has blind spots. And if I'm not accessible, if I don't show that I'm open to feedback and ideas and thoughts, or that I'm remaining relevant in my own skills or just perspectives, that's a problem. And so one of the best ways, at least at this moment in time, to kind of show that accessibility, I think, authentically, is to kind of put myself out there. And whether that's do a day in the life or a student takeover, or asking my perspective on higher education or anything, or bringing my dog to work and meeting Sam the dog.
Yellow lab?
Yellow lab.
Yellow labs are the best.
He's enjoying summer hours, so he's in my office every Friday. But it's about accessibility and just listening. And again, I think as I've grown in my own leadership, listening is, I think we hear it as like the most undervalued leadership skill. But I think as I am advancing in years, and there's, really extremely exciting kind of generations behind me, you have to just start putting your listening ears on. So that's an important, I think, part. And again, it sort of comes up in this report and the research that we're doing around pivoting and kind of knowing when to read the signals, and knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know.
That's right.
Is a really important part of my journey, which is why I'm so passionate about the report and helping people understand, like, it's not a deficit. You didn't do anything wrong. It's not that you're not skilled enough or trained enough. It's just this is inevitably going to happen if you're not listening and reading the signs and thinking about ways that you can change your own operating model to be more responsive to kind of what's happening. So again, I try to practice what I preach, but I can see myself in the report in terms of skills that I've needed to kind of amass and get comfortable with, despite kind of a default position that kind of, probably didn't want to change or kind of like the way I was doing things. But like if you're listening, you kind of have to change, right? And you want to do it in the shortest possible way, ahead, or the easiest possible way, which is like getting ahead of it and preventing it and being proactive versus waiting for something terrible to happen, a bad review or a layoff or
just time having passed.
Or time having passed and you're not kind of in the fast lane
How am I
anymore.
growing? How is this changing? How is this evolving? The report itself, Sidetracked, the hidden crisis in mid-career professional economic mobility. So this is NYU SPS and Burning Glass Institute.
Yes, through really generous support from the Gates Foundation and the Post-Secondary Success Team.
Shout out to the Gates Foundation for their investments in this report. The lead off on this is the exploration. We don't have to deep dive into the methodologies here. I think folks who have an interest in that should see how it is that Burning Glass and others kind of poked away at the data here to understand this. But the kind of lead off is drawing on over 1.3 million career histories, the report finds that 24% of mid-career professionals are stalled.
Yep.
Let's start from, what does stall mean?
Sure. So stall, really the definition that we were looking at is you're hitting a wall in terms of title growth and or salary growth. So you're just kind of getting stuck at that same level. And so you're looking for an unlock. And if that unlock is changing job titles to get more responsibility or kind of develop new skills, or that unlock is a wage increase and wage progression, or possibly both. And so the lack of that is stall. The presence of that is kind of career progression and career advancement. The absence of that is career stall.
Key takeaway point, mid-career stall is a structural problem, not an individual failure.
Absolutely.
And we'll dig in. Yeah, we'll dig into that. I do want to say before we do this, what triggered you to pursue this report?
Sure. So I'm super proud of this work. I'm really kind of quite in awe of Matt Siegelman and Sina and the team, Carlo, who kind of worked and collaborated deeply and were behind all of the research. What prompted it and what I'm proud about it is that we really went into this and sort of said, I could use this money to come up with a report helping me almost do a strategic plan at NYU for what we should be focusing in on and teaching. But what we said is, let's make this a public good. Let's really try to answer for anyone who's in that training space, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a public or private higher ed, whether you're a for-profit, whether you're an online provider or a boot camp. Let us really think about how we can do some research that can look at why people don't advance and be actionable and have results and not just diagnosing the problem, which is never fun in a report. It's much more fun if you can have kind of solutions. And let's use this funding to sort of not only diagnose kind of a new and different angle to the problem, but then to really put forth solutions that could be taken up by any number of types of organizations. And, our original thesis turned out to be a little different from what came out. I think the end result is far more interesting. Our original thesis was there are entry-level jobs, and then they were what we call destination jobs. So kind of, the next bump up, the next career ladder. But we sort of said entry and destination. Most people go into entry-level jobs assuming they're not going to be stuck there forever. They want to go to the next thing. And our early data and kind of early indications were showing that people weren't making it to their destination, but that for some certain occupations, short-term training could get them there. So that was kind of what we were thinking and looking at. We thought that would be helpful if we could identify the 20 or 30 occupations where training would help people arrive at their destination. And so we thought that would be really helpful, right, for colleges, for universities, for nonprofit training providers, for-profits to kind of understand what that could look like. And so as we were digging into the data, we found something far more interesting and I think far more compelling, not only regionally here in the New York tri-state area, but nationally, and then certainly as you look at different demographics, age, race, gender, which is, you want to know what? It's not just about 20 or 30 occupations. That almost sort of says you've got good occupations and not good occupations. This kind of blew the doors off the building and sort of said everyone is susceptible, whether you have a PhD, a master's, a bachelor's, a high school diploma, no college, everyone's going to experience some stall. And guess what? Fancy high growth jobs like finance or real estate or even healthcare, susceptible to it too. And so that started really sort of just reframing. And I love reframing because I think that's where you get a lot of creativity. It ended up then kind of showing us, and I think we were really quite shocked, to be candid, in the early previews of the research, to say this is something that's going to get a lot of attention because the idea is it's not a failing, it's not deficit-oriented body of work on kind of what people should do and what people ought to do and how you ought to fix yourself and why you're broken. It's just, this is going to happen. And I often use kind of a healthcare example, which is if you know you have susceptibility to heart disease in your family, most people are not going to wait around for the heart attack, right? They're going to take their blood pressure medicine. They're going to change their diet. They're going to do something to prevent that from happening. And so if we can now reframe to say everyone's susceptible to hitting a ceiling, to hitting a wall, and here are the things that you could proactively do. Here's the version of exercise, a good diet, and blood pressure pills that you can take to avoid that kind of jolt. wouldn't you do it? I think we would all do it. I think that's what you see us doing, right? It's being proactive. And so I found that to be very compelling. And then, I mean, if you take that analogy further, sometimes you need a deep intervention. Sometimes you just need prevention. Sometimes you need kind of a little bit of tweaks and changes. Sometimes you need something much more surgical or kind of focused. And if you think about education as an intervention of different depths or doses or durations or intensities, that's what education is. And so that leads me to kind of that place where, sure, not everyone, a degree is not the answer for everyone. We have a huge body of decades of evidence to say that lifetime earnings are just going to be much higher in multiples if you have higher levels of skills and education. But notwithstanding, at any level, you really have to think about what you're doing next if you want to continue to progress. And so I found that to be very helpful because, again, I think it's it's a false dichotomy to say college or no college, value or no value,
right.
expensive or not. It's the world is not that black and white when it comes to skills and jobs. The other thing that I like about this report, that I love about this report, is I think that there is a way for workers and employees to see themselves in the report and what they might want and could do. I think there's a way for educators and nonprofit leaders and workforce development practitioners to see themselves in the report and what they can do and what they might want to continue or stop or start or launch. And there's a place for employers to think about this as well. And you've been in this space for a long time. You manage a very successful membership organization with hundreds of nonprofits. I think we are always at a loss, or I shouldn't say we. I have always been at a loss for how to engage employers effectively and how to make sure that they're at the table with solutions and not just problems on, well, if higher ed only did their jobs better, I'd have a better workforce. Or if K through 12 did their jobs better, we'd have a better workforce. Or, X, Y, Z. If public higher ed did a better job, we'd be better. If XYZ private colleges did jobs more like the elites and Ivies, we'd be better. Like, it's always just like, if you could do better. And in this report, we're like, no, there's actually something for every single stakeholder to do and to understand and react to. And I appreciate that kind of aspect of the report, that this is not just something that is for the policymakers. So there's policy.
Although there's a policy
angle in there for sure.
That's right.
But I think that's important to be relevant.
I'm okay with using the word "we" in some of that.
Thank you for the permission. I will try.
But
you're not really supposed to speak for others, so I'm going to probably
I'm going to say
for
we
myself,
in this case.
But, okay, maybe.
I'm going to say we in this case. You and I have sat in enough rooms together.
Okay. Well, if we is
we're
me
gonna
and
go
you,
with we.
Sure.
We're going to go, well, at the very least, we'll start that. And I suspect there are people, by the way, right now listening to the pod who are both in the bucket of thinking to themselves, I do feel stalled.
Sure.
We're going to have that. We're going to have folks who are saying, you know what? I hear a lot of people pointing fingers at what needs to change.
Right.
Why is it that it hasn't happened yet?
Well, I mean, Greg, have you ever been in a job where you felt stalled?
Are you kidding?
Yes or no?
I feel stalled. I don't know when I've ever not felt
right.
stalled in some way. So
and so same.
We're
I have
experiencing
had
this.
jobs where I have felt stalled, and so like that's the first piece where we're not alone in this. And
we're
to
not
kind of where you
we're not alone.
Started. I think of many friends and colleagues who I've had those coaching conversations with, or I've sought coaching for myself to sort of say, I'm feeling like I'm hitting a wall.
That's right.
And that's, again, the part where it's really important to just sort of acknowledge that and sort of say there's nothing wrong with anyone.
That's
and again,
right.
I think across, and the research kind of bears out, like across all occupations, across the country, people across all levels of job experience, people are experiencing this. Again, I worry, and we'll probably get to this later, but as with everything, inequality is not, or equity is not evenly distributed. And so I think this does point out to some real problems, right? If we don't start to address this, where I think widening gaps of equity can get even wider. But we could talk about that. But again, I think that's a truism for probably about everything, right? If we don't address policy, or if we don't address wages, or if we don't address affordability or housing costs, those inequalities that exist today are going to get deeper. I think this report does. does point to, I think, a body of evidence that if we don't address aspects of this career stall, the disparities will get even wider.
I want to circle back to one thing, because you started to do it and I wanted to flag it. You've made a practice of using healthcare-related analogies when you talk about the value, I think, of what education pathways look like. I've heard you say things like, we need to move from being a schooled society to a learning society. And I think you've bridged that specifically to the idea of what dosages do folks need over time. We also recognize, as pointed out, historically, systemically, institutionally, the folks who have not gotten certain dosages, some folks who have gotten certain dosages, and what that looks like. I've also heard you say this idea, as you have here, right? Like, to use the analogy of healthcare, what's the preventative medicines I need to take?
Exactly.
How do I get away from having to respond to crisis by having the right dosages of support over the course of time? And I want to sort of focus on that for a second, because, to your point, if I'm experiencing stall right now, again, to go back to the initial point, this is a structural issue, not an individual one. Right? Using that healthcare analogy, what is it that the report is telling us that needs to change systemically, individually? Just what is the approach that struck you the most that said, okay, this is how we have to turn this around?
Sure. So a few things. So skills and training, kind of non-degree, so short term, again, whether you define that as kind of around 6 months, let's say, there is absolutely kind of a skilling answer to stall. I'll give you a small example. Last night, I was at a work dinner. A young woman who was an admissions officer for 8 years at NYU decided to most recently kind of take on a new job in an HR position in a private sector company. And I was like, that's interesting. I actually haven't heard of that kind of career path. And she's like, it's actually extremely intuitive. You basically are evaluating people on a portfolio and application, and you're saying yes or no. That's actually like the definition of HR, at least from a candidate attraction and kind of recruiting perspective. And she is taking a data analytics course at our school because she knew that the context for HR was awfully similar, but that metrics and outcomes and reporting and using statistics wasn't something that she felt like she used a lot or developed a lot in a higher ed admissions role, but that with some very practical kind of a 5-week data analytics course, she could feel both confident and comfortable and acquire new skills to be really smart and knowledgeable in HR transition. And so I give that example because I think it's really, it's fresh. It's less than 24 hours old, but that's kind of what the report says, which is it's not something huge. And that course is, it's online. She's now convinced like 5 of her former admissions colleagues to take it as well. And it's a few $100s. And it gives her enough in her new role to really think differently. And I actually think she started it before she left. So it was even kind of tuition remission. So that's a skilling example and one of the kind of key takeaways in terms of how to deal with stall. And that's for an individual to think about their own skilling profile and their own capabilities. I think something that we can do from an employer perspective is really, and you're starting to see this, and again, I'm an AI optimist, and I think AI is going to be really good for us to think about our skilling opportunities in just about every occupation and job. And so as an employer, I'm seeing a ton of investment in experimentation, in, for lack of a better way of saying it, kind of playing around with new and different skills. And so in real estate, that was one of the sectors that you can experience stall in, or in finance. That's a sector that you can experience
because the report does
stall.
deep dive into some specific career titles and occupations,
Right.
likelihood of stall, and then sort of says, here are some adjacent roles, here are some skill sets, here's some experience. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Right, and so I won't use a sort of a fancy example, but again, talking to someone recently who entered into the labor market in the late 90s, entry-level job, he was a stockbroker. it's so funny because that's like such a dated term now,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
like you can't really be a stockbroker.
Like Wall Street, yes.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun,
Right.
dun. Yeah,
But
yes,
like
I
you're
get
not
it.
really doing that job anymore,
Yeah.
right? Because technology got
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
hold of kind of, e-trading and electronic, financial transactions. And so, no one's a stockbroker today, but you still have people who are in the investment industry, right? Because they understand technology, they understand platforms. They're not coding, they're not software developers, but they're people who are understanding the fundamentals of a good company worth investing in a not good company, and then how you do the job changes, right? So that's the examples of just kind of trying to understand kind of technology without being a specialist or not. So again, I think there are investments that companies are making, right? So those companies that used to hire stockbrokers, now have different kind of investment professionals and different kind of trading professionals,
That's right.
and they do internal training to bridge that. So the second point of the report is just saying that there's certainly a disruption that's been happening around technology for the past decade, now accelerated since 2023. But that's the responsibility of companies, to look at their own
To be
business
responsive
model.
to that, right.
Yeah, and kind of change up their roles, change up the job architecture, change up the job positions, and, where there is an existing workforce, kind of retrain them. And I'm seeing just a lot more of that internal training happening for folks. I'd say the third example, so that's an employer kind of example. The last piece is around educators, right? And so being really skills specific in terms of thinking about what are doses of education,
There it is.
doses of training that we can provide, we, nonprofits, higher ed, public,
Yep.
private, online, that are really very relevant to kind of occupations. And so when I think about that, right, we'll often almost get too specific, I think, but what we see within the report is that skills matter. So I think about project management. I think about the skills that I hire for all the time and that I invest in our own workforce. We happen to have great tuition remission, right? And so project management, so many of my employees take on project management certificates. Many of my employees take on data analytics and data visualization courses. Many of my employees take on AI and communications classes. Many of my employees take on kind of public speaking and kind of team building related classes. And these are classes. They're kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions, no more than that. They're a few $100s. They are relevant. We ask folks to pick classes that are relevant to their job, and then we pay for it. That's important. And again, I say that not as an employer, but as a provider of education. Like we are very... we want to give the most impactful but shortest form of education that's possible in the continuing education space, right? You don't have to give someone and we've all been to trainings, right, where someone at the beginning sort of says, if you take away nothing else from this training, let it be this one thing.
That's
well,
right.
gosh, why did I have to sit in 8 hours of training if I
walk
only
out
needed
right at the end of,
hear
that's
the
right.
30 minutes?
I have my muffin and coffee and hear that point, and then I leave.
The same thing in education, we shouldn't give 100 hours of
There it
something if what people really just need is the 20-hour version of stats for HR, project management for non-IT professionals, communicating using digital kind of AI tools. Give folks the 30 or 40-minute version of the thing. Don't stick them in a 100-hour training. And so those are the three pieces that I think are really important. Thinking about your own trajectory. If you're stalled as, let's call it, not picking on anyone, but as an admissions officer, pivot to be an HR officer. It's not that far.
That's right. There's your adjacent role.
Right. If you're an employer where technology is just changing the role, well, then change your job descriptions and
That's
or
right.
offer the training internally. And then if
That's
you're
right.
a provider, whether you're a nonprofit or higher ed, think about that training where someone says, if you take nothing else away from this but this one thing, well, then chop up your darn training to offer
That's
those
right.
things that are very legible and very clear and visible to trainees.
Create the most
Don't
effective.
over-educate.
Right. Create the most effective dosage. Make sure it's the right time period. Make sure it's effective.
Right.
Make it work. Hold it accountable, etc.
Right. So, like, first principles, nothing earth-shattering with
No.
that, but I do feel like we have bundled together a lot of ideas and durable skills, soft skills, technical skills.
Yeah. What are the
skill
language
wheel.
we use now?
Right.
That's right. The
It
skill
just-
wheel. The skill wheel. That's
I
right.
just think that we've bundled up too many things. And again, I say this hearing myself. This is a good incumbent worker strategy, right? So if you have a job, and I think we do the bundling because I think we are trying to get a lot of folks who are out of the labor market, not in a job, best prepared. So we kind of think more is better, right? But I don't know that more is better when you're in this mid-level stall. I actually think less is better when you have a basis of work experience, even if you're unemployed, but if you have a basis of work experience, you have a track record, you have skills that are transferable. I think for this middle skill, this is why we're very adamant. Like, you don't need to get the master's degree.
Right.
Again, if you're in a different part of your career and academic journey, master's degree in that depth is great.
That's right.
Certainly.
That's right.
But for mid-career stall at these jobs, we see it being much more of a shorter-term intervention to be made.
There's a section of this report, strategies to prevent and override stall. Top common skills distinguish non-stalled workers from otherwise similarly stalled peers. Top common skills for those. How much more common among non-stalled workers? Top three, not surprising perhaps. Public speaking, leadership, and team management. Now, we could unpack what those definitions are and how those look, but not surprising.
Not at all.
At all, right? And then if you go to specialized skills, let's bring it back to you now with doing your Instagram vids. What's it like to be a dean? Here it is. Number one, top specialized skills, social media.
Absolutely. Gosh, the easiest way for digital natives to like excel past us old timers and Gen Xers.
100%.
Absolutely.
Social media, event planning, and community outreach. These are not terribly surprising, and also these are all skills that can either atrophy if you're not practicing them consistently. They're also skills that sometimes are overwhelming to take on and learn or to embrace. I mean, the number of people in our lives who are terribly frightened, even the most successful executives who feel anxiety about public speaking, for instance. Or how does it mean and how does it look to be successful at community outreach?
So and so a couple of things about those what the research kind of put out in terms of both the overarching as well as the specialized. Not they're human skills, right?
Yes.
So they're not ones that kind of technology will totally take away, but they're ones that technology will impact.
That's right.
Again, I think a lot. I am an introverted person. I can kind of turn it on and be very extroverted around things that I'm passionate about. But make no mistake, I think best. I am best when I'm kind of alone in my head. And so I think about public speaking, and it doesn't bother me. But I think about community outreach, and that excites me, right? And so I think what's interesting about the report is it's not sort of saying everyone needs to be perfect and everyone needs to be the most eloquent speaker. It's just if that's not your bag, fine. But if you're like really hyper organized, maybe you think about project management. If you are really excited by data, and there's a lot of people that are really excited by organizing data and kind of looking at trends, think about a finance course. Think about a data course.
That's right.
If you want to be more publicly facing, think about communication skills. I mean, everything that I'm hearing for years, and it's probably amplified in the past year as we've been thinking about technology disruption, is those skills are indeed, have always been, and are becoming ever more important. We're looking at our own school for both our degree and non-degree students we're always looking at kind of essentially kind of navigating modern careers, right? And so we're designing some courses. I try to teach a course every year, and so I'm designing my course for this upcoming academic year, and it'll be something around kind of navigating modern careers, and it'll focus in a lot more on entrepreneurship skills and skills to give people agency. Last year I did a leadership development course because I thought that was more important, but as I think about it, I think the meta theme is navigation, and navigation requires comfort with ambiguity. Navigation requires some level of entrepreneurial thinking. Navigation requires sometimes leadership. Navigation requires communication. Navigation requires listening. I think navigation requires being reflective. And so that's what I think is really important, and I think that's kind of reflected in the report.
That's right.
Again, we're not looking for anyone to be perfect. We're not looking for anyone to be wildly different from who they are. What we are suggesting is paying more mind and attention to your environment, to your context, to the role,
That's
to
right.
your industry, to adjacent jobs and the skills that they require, and how you might bridge that short term through training to be preventative is really important. So again, it's this kind of awareness rather than life or jobs happening to you, a better awareness for kind of what is occurring and kind of how you can navigate it.
And it's also an awareness that your skills can depreciate if you're not practicing them.
They will.
Your networks
Period.
will atrophy
Yours
if you
and
don't.
mine
Right. They will.
It's
Your
a muscle.
networks
Yes.
will not grow if you're not working the networks. Right.
Correct. And again, we have optionality, right?
That's right.
But I mean, later today, we have a leadership development program that one of our units is doing, and so I'm going to speak to them. And one of the questions was like, how have you evolved your own leadership practice over your career? And again, I'll probably be talking about some of the same things I'll be talking about this report, which is who I was as a leader when I was at StreetWise Partners is really different from who I am as a leader now. Who I was as a leader in city government, I was an ideas person. I was hard charging. I kind of just like ran through every door that was open. And I think I tried that at Per Scholas, and I kind of fell down on my butt because people weren't ready for that. They didn't want to be told what to do. And you can kind of tell people what to do when you're in government. In a nonprofit, an awesome nonprofit in the South Bronx, you're going to have to learn how to listen to folks who
you don't have the
are
answers to
working,
start.
period.
That's right.
And I feel like I learned that in my mind, like in my first week. And I was like, oh,
Right.
you're not in Kansas anymore.
That's right. That's right.
And now in my current role in higher ed, it's a lot of listening and a lot of observing because we've got wildly different stakeholders. And so that's a leadership journey from hard charging, any idea is a good idea, to shut up and listen. And so I say that to people to say, again, this is going to be a very mid-level group. And, if they don't embrace those changes, they will atrophy. I still think I'm a leader. I still think I was a leader when I was at StreetWise Partners 24 years ago, but I'm a super different leader now because of skill development. And so, again, I think if we just break it down, that there's no magic to this.
That's right.
But you are going to have to change.
That's right.
If you want to, continue to advance.
And we are who we are, too. What I mean by that is, as I think about what leadership looked like on the beginning of this journey to today, there are some elements, some pieces of the puzzle that are the same. It was funny, you said you're an introvert, but you need to be an outward-facing individual. I think some people might hear that and think, how is that possible? You have to be in front of folks all the time. I feel the same way. I have to be in front of folks all the time. That I don't get comfort necessarily. I don't necessarily joy in that. There's a mask or a performance that has to go with that in some ways. But I bring that up because knowing something about who you are, and I don't remember when it was in the beginning of my career, reading some book that was produced about how it is you have a certain set of skills. And you can either get really good at the stuff you're good at and then figure out how to work with others to fill the other gaps. But that doesn't put you in a position where you shouldn't be learning new things.
Right.
And that's the tension. And leaders of all levels have to think about this. And I guess one of the key pieces of this is, and this is how the report sort of wraps up in the discussion section, stall becomes progressively harder to reverse the longer it persists.
Right.
So that idea of like awareness of who I am, where I am, what I'm thinking about, if I don't take action, if I'm not seeking to evolve in the ways that I can, or use my networks to think about how to do that, well, now I'm going to get stuck even longer.
Right. So Doug Harris and I should give a really big shout out to one of your board members.
Shout out to Doug, our advisory council. Love Doug. He's such a good
Doug
dude.
is amazing. And so
he always wants me to take a selfie. But Doug, yes, we always do a selfie together.
Doug, we love you. I'll take a selfie with you any
1,000%.
day. Greg, you should too. So I mentioned Doug Harrison, and again, he and his team are really responsible for kind of working really, really closely with Burning Glass Institute on this project. But he says this all the time, and it's really interesting. I think as I talked to him about this report and as we kind of discussed what it means for our school, what is so, I think, profound about this report is that this is a large problem and it is preventable and it is perceptible early on. Right? And so don't just wait till you have that heart attack. Don't just wait till you have that problem. Don't wait till you see everyone else kind of bypassing you or kind of moving way ahead of you in your career.
Or don't ignore the discomfort you're feeling.
Don't ignore it. Don't just think, I'm just a couple years out of college. This is how it's supposed to be. Or this is an industry where it's just, you got to do your time. Or this, you just have to kind of suck it up till you kind of hit it big. Nope. Bad idea. Really bad idea. If you are perceiving that, you need to change something about your context, your skills, how you're approaching the job. And I've been in workforce development probably at this point, we're in 2026, about 26 years. And so a lot of early research from MDRC that I worked in that kind of animated a lot of my workforce approaches over the years has been you have to change jobs to advance. That is still absolutely true. It's uncomfortable, but I go back and I say this all the time to my students, you will have 4 to 5 careers and you'll have 12 to 13 jobs. And so there's an interesting body of research. Arun Gupta just wrote a book called Mission Generation, and it's a really interesting thesis, which is if we're going to have 4 to 5 careers, wouldn't it be far more interesting to have a career in government, a career in nonprofits, a career in media, or the private sector, or education? Like, vary it up. Like, if you know that that's what the data says, why would you just go and, do one thing? And so that goes back to the, it's predictable. Literally, all from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we will have 12 to 13 jobs, right? And so why wouldn't you vary it up a little bit?
That's right.
Why wouldn't you think about opportunity? And again, I think a big part of, what you just read, which is if we know this is going to happen, if we know that kind of, within 10 years you're going to be able to see it, why wouldn't we give ourselves the best odds of finding what we're good at, figuring out, what actually are environments or job types or occupations or industries that are really exciting to us, where we have a higher probability of being successful. We're excited about the work. And why wouldn't we have a career in government? Why wouldn't we try a bit in a nonprofit? Why wouldn't we try a bit in the private sector? We just get so tied to one version of ourselves. Right. I say this to students all the time. We do a lot of the Design Your Life framework from the Stanford Design School and kind of innovation programs that all of us have the capability to have widely successful, really divergent paths. And we often just sort of define one and sort of say, that's my identity. I'm supposed to be X in media or a creative or an engineer. It's like, no, you actually are. The data shows that you will be most successful if you try out different things. The data shows that you're going to kind of get stale if you don't try out new skills. Right. And so these are just facts that I think we have to get a lot better at. It is why I will say, and this may or may not be controversial, I cannot stand when we try to track people very young into a career path. I don't know if anyone has teenagers. I've got a 16 and an 18-year-old, and I can't track them into anything. They are brilliant kids. They're confident. They're respectful. They're fun. They're happy, and they are not to be tracked. They will rage against it. Yet we try to do that.
Do that all the time.
And I think it is helpful to explore careers. It's helpful to kind of have nice paved paths to explore. It is erroneous to pretend that success is staying on that paved path your entire career or even for many years. We really mistake exploration with paths and kind of futures. And I think that, again, the research doesn't support that as a strategy for everyone. I think there's really good evidence to suggest that that paved path, making the path less friction-filled, is important, sure. Per Scholas is kind of taking the friction out of the system, important, but we still have to continue to update skills, update kind of capabilities, and kind of be really aware that adjacencies in terms of jobs is an important path to progress and advancement.
And as we wind down here, I want to talk for a minute, too, about entry-level jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And as you talk about pathways, as you talk about and this new obsession that has started to exist in our sector, workforce sector, about working people or trying to find pathways to middle wage career jobs. I see you.
Mm-hmm.
I see your face as I say that.
You see a pained look and cringing.
I see the pained look on your face.
Listeners on my face, yes. Mm-hmm.
I can't help but say two things. One, you've been someone who said it's that entry-level job is critical. It could look different ways, and it should be a reasonable wage, and it should be. But the reality is you have to have your foot in the door to begin a path.
Yep.
And I think you've been championing that. And also to your idea or to this conversation about mid-career stall, and now we talk about this focus on middle wages and what does that look like. How is it that you think about, given your vast history, that we try to create a workforce ecosystem that doesn't default to some of this? Well, if it's not a $40 an hour job, it doesn't matter. Well, if I need to track the 16-year-old because if I don't know where they're starting and where they're ending, then I shouldn't invest in this. Well, we're a city with all these different the answer has got to be the AI. If we don't get everybody up to speed on AI immediately, the city's going to crash. You as someone who has this rich history and background and understanding of how things work in different spaces and sectors, what's your sense in this moment? Like, what would you want this city to do or be as it sort of struggles, I would suggest, to figure out what that pathway that you've talked about should look like or could look like for your 16 or 18-year-olds or anybody else's. But not only that, for the folks who need to reskill or upskill or just be able to find their footing now.
Thank you for the easy question, Greg.
To wrap us up. And so we're all listening to wrap us up here, the key words.
Gosh. So here's how I approach it, which is stay the course, right? And so there's been so much hype, and I'm appreciating the headlines kind of in the past few months of the AI hype versus what is real. So I think kind of stay the course, which is we know how adults learn. We know that hands-on, experiential, applied learning, grounding, learning and learning solutions in real-world practical examples has been what learning science has helped us understand. Like the human brain is the human brain, right? It has a wild capacity for growth, but how we learn as adults, it is best when it's hands-on, experiential, applied, and tethered to the real world. So when I say stay the course, that's what I tell our folks all the time. How we practice that, kind of how we engage with employers to do that is absolutely changing, right? I mean, 5-10 years ago, it was all like get internships for every single person. When I was at CUNY, I said that. I know that CUNY has a really amazing CUNY Beyond campaign around that.
Which is fantastic.
Which is awesome, period. And I also know that for a lot of our employers who I work with remote work, internships are not as easy to come by.
That's right.
And so I give that example of stay the course, applied experiential learning is best, kind of low stakes examples of kind of building skills and kind of, with real business problems is best. And so we do things like we're building kind of a career compass where we're building work-based projects into our curriculum. We do case competitions where we give students a semester-long business problem live from a real employer to solve, and that actually looks a hell of a lot like an internship. So again, I applaud the notion and the aspirational guidepost that every single student, for example, should get an internship. I would just suggest there might be multiple ways to get at those experiences. So that's a non-answer to the kind of what do we do now, but I think we just can't forget these principles of how people learn best. I think we can't, I'll go back to the healthcare analogy. When we know something's going to happen, when we know we are susceptible to something, whether we're in public administration, that was kind of highlighted as a highly susceptible area. That doesn't mean public administration is a bad job. That just means if you're going to get into it, God's work, awesome. I will say that my career in public administration still continues to be my professional highlight, even though I think I've done some cool things subsequently. It doesn't mean it's a bad sector or set of occupations. It just means know that you're in it and know that you're going to probably have to develop more skills to pivot if you're going to choose that as your area. And so those are, some of the pieces. And so, again, I'll use the public administration example. If you're in public administration, you know that folks are going to have more stall, just like that's what the research, that's what the data indicates, right? Let's think about what those pathways are for internal professional development. Let's think about what tuition reimbursement looks like. Let's think what workshops look like. Let's think about what kind of applied learning looks like in that environment. And so those are the pieces that I think are most important. Again, from a policy, as we think about New York City, to your point, in the K through 12 system, I am so proud of what the city has done, whether it's the Future Ready high school movement, whether it's CUNY, thinking about the Beyond CUNY and focusing on jobs and career success, employers getting organized through both the Partnership for New York and the CEO Jobs Council. Boy, oh boy, we are such a different place than we were before in terms of being organized around using data and using facts. We're a big city, and so there's never going to be kind of one solution. But I'm really enthused by kind of thinking about where we started, which is more options that are more affordable. I remember the moment, again, good friends who worked at General Assembly, and a pretty high price tag for highly effective work. That model's changed. I remember having debates about social impact bonds and career income agreements. Never loved those, and we've moved away from them because I think we're finding other tools for affordability. So I feel like just stay the course. Let's keep interrogating and questioning things that don't feel quite equitable, but we have to use this type of research to know once you get that first job is not done. The last thing I will say is we often make the mistake of thinking kind of that first job placement, or that first job is success. And it's wow, that's the first mile in a long marathon, right? And then we look at retention 1 year in the same job or in the industry. Not enough, right? Not enough to use those as indicators. So I do think maybe some new work would be thinking about this research and thinking about what are ways to measure, have some metrics or outcomes that we're tracking to predict where we might want to put some interventions or some dollars or some policy or some, working with employers and partnering with employers between nonprofits or higher ed to address things that we kind of know are about to happen.
Yeah. The report, Sidetracked, the hidden crisis in mid-career professional economic mobility. Start by digging into that. Get into that report. Ask questions about that report. Watch the NBC Now. By the way, you were on NBC Now before this.
The live stream this morning.
So there's a live stream all about it that you can go back to the YouTube clip. I'm sure you can watch that now. To get caught up in that.
We feel so passionately that this is, and again, the way the report does it, it was both kind of a national and a regional look. And so we've really been pushing out. So we're in the Wall Street Journal earlier this week, and then some live stream on NBC. And the idea here is to really get the word out so that the multiple stakeholders, whether it's workers or trainers or educators or employers, can understand this, not feel so alone, understand that there is a antidote to feeling like you're dead-ended and that there's lots of options, many of which are free and affordable to really get out of that conundrum of feeling like you're stuck.
And listen, anybody who's listening right now, I'm guaranteeing wherever you are, you're probably having a moment where you might be feeling stuck. You might be thinking about what your path is. To quote Angie from another YouTube clip from the past, she cringes as I say that out loud. This is you. Be courageous. Confidence comes.
Well said.
That's all you
Greg
right
Morris.
There. That was your words. Exactly. And I love that. Listen.
And be patient. Confidence comes.
And be patient. And by the way, from one paper boy to a paper girl.
Yes.
Career journeys start in one place, and they certainly do evolve in all sorts of different ways.
Who knows where we're going to land?
Who would have imagined this is where we would be? Angie, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful for you sharing your journey with us, the how you think, the way you think, why you think, what you have learned all along the way, I think, has been transformative and will continue to be. I look forward to continuing all of our conversations as we go forward in spaces like this and in rooms where we just kind of sometimes make faces at each other. Like,
Greg,
what is
thank
happening
you.
here?
The work of the coalition is so important. It's been amazing. I've tracked you since it was founded, before you landed as such a successful executive director. So really appreciate all of the work that you do. Thank you.
You are far too kind. Thank you so much. Much more to come.
Great.